The Blast from Our Past Network.
Welcome to Podcasting After Dark presents Interviews After Dark with your hosts Corey Stevenson and Zach Schaefer. Tonight's interview is with the authors of TCM Underground, 50 Must-See Films from the World of Classic Cult and Late Night Cinema, Millie De Chirico and Quatoyiah Murry.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to Podcasting After Dark presents Interviews After Dark. This month, we have a very, very special discussion for you all. We have the two authors of TCM Underground, 50 Must-See Films from the World of Classic Cult and Late Night Cinema. We have authors Millie De Chirico and Quatoyiah Murry. Ladies, how's it going?
Fabulous. Thank you guys for having us.
Hello.
I gotta say, when we found out your book was coming out, Corey and I offline said we need to get Millie and Quatoyiah on our show because this book is right in our wheelhouse. It's everything that we're about. And then we got an advanced copy of your book, and oh my gosh, I was salivating at the content that you guys put in this thing. Seriously, like.
Awesome.
Yeah, both of you, Millie and Quatoyiah, just really blew us away.
Oh, thank you so much.
It's a great looking book, beautiful pictures. It's got a nice, nice weight to it. I like a good weighty, book. It's a good coffee table book. Also good to hit somebody with. But
Exactly.
But you all have some really fantastic, deep cuts and everything and whatnot in this book. And we're going to get to all of that. But can we get some background on both of you? Toya, what is your background?
My background is I am a film writer. I've been writing film reviews, and just for myself, my blog name is The Cinephiliac, but I also have written for Movie Boozer, Pretty Clever Films, kind of all over the place. I've been writing for about 15 years now. So yeah, I've been doing that for a long time. I was lucky enough to get into TCM about 6 years ago, and I started working with this wonderful woman. And just last year during the pandemic, we kind of got approached to write this book. And this was something, I was a huge TCM Underground fan for years. So when I first got to TCM and I met Millie and found out she's, the underground queen, I immediately kind of like panicked a little bit of like, oh my God, I'll do anything you want me to do for Underground. And I kind of did. I started doing any and everything I could to support Underground. We got a lot of cool screenings in Atlanta because we're both Atlanta based. Well, Millie was not at the time, but I was. So yeah, we got a couple of great screenings done because of TCM Underground and promotion of TCM Underground. And so yeah, I've just been a champion for the cult world ever since. It's been a favorite of mine since I was a child. I never really knew what cult movies were, like that they were a genre of film necessarily, probably up until college. And I was like, oh, so all these weird movies, they're called cult movies that I like. Okay, cool. That's what that is. So it's just really cool that there's a group of people that, all love these movies as well. And so it's just been an honor to get to work on the book and get to work with Millie with it. But currently right now I am in Paris, France. So I left America to go to school to learn more about film and just to be a nerd that gets to live in France and talk to French people about movies. So
jealous.
That's
Jeez.
awesome. How are you liking it over there?
Oh, I adore it. It's I constantly tell people it's the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. And then every time I say that, something else happens that makes it truly the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. So trying to get the language, trying to get my life adjusted, but I've been here for a year now and I'm trying to stay for good. And I absolutely adore it. I plan to live here for as long as the government will allow me.
Wow.
We told her to never come home, basically.
Wait a minute.
You can come visit, but don't come back. Just
Wait, so Millie, you're now based in Atlanta and you weren't prior. So Toya, were you like, okay, you fill my spot, Millie, I'm leaving, I'm going to Paris, and Millie, you just fill in as the queen of cult cinema. Millie, tell us your background a little bit.
I started at TCM in 2004, so I've been there for a long time.
That's
Um,
great.
yeah, it's sometimes it feels like I just started, and other times it definitely feels like I've been there for almost 20 years. Um, I essentially was, interested in programming. I had worked in radio and was a DJ and was kind of like working in music sort of, but I had studied film, and I've just loved cult movies since I was in high school. And when I got the opportunity after I graduated from my undergrad film program, I was like thinking I'd probably go into music or something. But that was kind of around the collapse of the music industry, as it were, like the Napster era. God, I'm
Oh my
like
gosh,
really
yeah.
aging myself. I'm sorry.
Thanks,
Uh,
LimeWire.
yeah. But I had always loved movies too, and I was definitely interested in programming. And so I got the opportunity to come work at TCM and in the programming department, and it was it was just such a incredible experience. And in 2006, I got the opportunity to work on Underground, which they just launched it. It was a idea that was presented by this former TCM employee, Eric Weber, and he left the network shortly after, but I have been programming it ever since. And so, yeah, I program Underground and then program with my colleagues the rest of the network. So my programming is peppered throughout the schedule, like weekend daytime, for example, is probably something I programmed. Or
Nice.
I work with Eddie Muller and Alicia Malone on their franchises, Noir Alley and Imports, and come up with themes and stuff for the regular schedule. But obviously my passion is for Underground. And over the course of the years, just been hammering away on that programming. But also then during the pandemic, we including Toya, we had the opportunity to kind of start this YouTube series called TCM Underground, which was essentially a way for us at the network to hang out. I would say it was kind of an opportunity for us to kind of hang out and gab about cult movies, and then we just kept it going. So now that's something that we all still work on, and Toya pops in from time to time on episodes, even though she's in France. And so that's been pretty much my life up until the book. So
Wow.
We should probably just really quick clarify what TCM is, just for those out there who might not actually know what we're talking about. So can you give like sort of an overview of what TCM Underground is and where you can find it? Not the book, but the actual show and
the
everything.
franchise.
Yeah, the franchise.
Yeah. So TCM Underground is like a late night cult movie showcase that comes on the cable channel Turner Classic Movies Friday nights, technically Saturday mornings on the East Coast, 2 a.m. And of course, on the West Coast, it comes on much earlier. But it's basically our repository for kind of late night, weird cult movie fare. It comes on. It's usually double featured. So it's like a 2 a.m. and a 4 a.m. movie on the East Coast. And we try to throw in some cool short films in between. And and it's been around since 2006. So it's been going for a long time.
Yeah. So those of us who are a certain age, this has kind of replaced USA Up All Night type of stuff, like sort of replaced that niche and everything.
That's an honor that you just said that, by the way. I'm like,
no, I 100% agree. I 100% agree. This is why I've always loved TCM Underground, though. I tell people that it's it's like the Adult Swim of Cartoon Network. It's the TCM Underground is that for Turner Classic Movies. I think, both Millie and myself grew up watching Up All Night, and shows like that, like programming blocks like that. So I think it's just a very happy coincidence that we get to kind of do this and kind of continue that tradition.
Yeah, I've been watching TCM's Underground since its inception. I remember as a film student way back when, like just loving Robert Osborne and seeing his segments and just falling in love with the channel and just being just really just like wanting to just listen to these guys talk the whole time, and then getting introduced to TCM Underground and going, whoa, there's some great stuff here. It's not just in film school. They say, oh, the cult movies, we're going to talk about Touch of Evil. And you're like, wait, that's not the only cult-ish movie that we can talk about here, even though I love Touch of Evil. But, you know, it got more and more deeper. And like, I think that's the first time I saw Spider Baby was on Underground, you know, and just really got turned on to a bunch of new content. And Corey and I both living in LA around that time, going to a theater down here called New Beverly Cinema that's now owned by Quentin Tarantino. And he would show his Grindhouse nights and more gritty stuff. And just having that complement outside of TCM Underground. And that market, that niche you found to carry on the tradition of shows like USA Up All Night, or, you know, I'm from Michigan, Detroit. And so we had Thriller TV, which was like hosted by this really creepy, I forget his name now, but it had that like double features in the afternoon of like Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Things or The Changeling or something like that. Right. Yeah. And so that's the stuff I grew up on and had that continued as an adult, which is fantastic. So here we are with your book. That is the perfect complement to TCM. And not everybody has Turner Classic Movies. So if they don't, to have the opportunity to get this book is fantastic.
Definitely. And I think that that's one of the major reasons that we started TCM Slumber Ground during the pandemic. You know, it definitely was a, hey, you know, let's get together and hang out and talk about these movies that we love. But it was also this recognition that everybody doesn't get TCM, you know, because of rights issues, because of channels, all of that stuff. You know, there are people on the West Coast. We do multiple festivals throughout the year with TCM. We go and we meet people who are huge classic movie fans, and they're like, oh, well, I can't get TCM, you know, so it's that made it, you know, we just kind of put our brains together to figure out, well, you know, how can we serve the cult audience, knowing that, especially, you know, we're from a generation of cable cord cutters. And so people are moving away from cable anyway. So we just figured, you know, YouTube is the next best thing. Let's just get on there and talk about these movies. And so, yeah, so now we have TCM Slumber Ground comes on at least once a month on the YouTube channel. And it's just a way of kind of introducing people more into the TCM Underground world and just hoping to create a dialogue that way.
Yeah.
Do you find that your audience is around like sort of our age? That's what we tend to find for podcasting after dark. But we do have some younger generation folks coming in and finding us. And I hear back like feedback, some of the appeal that, you know, we have as older folks is that we actually got to see a lot of these movies like in the theater and all that kind of stuff. But do you find that the YouTube channel is reaching a younger audience being on that platform, and maybe some of these cult movies that they never would have heard of is reaching, you know, some of younger people?
I'll speak. Sorry, you go ahead, Millie.
No. Go ahead. Speak to the YouTube stuff, because I admittedly know less. That's me being our age, is that I'm like, how do we know the information about YouTube? But Toya has worked in that world, so I'll let her answer.
Yeah. So yeah, which is really funny because with me showing my age, I'm a millennial, so YouTube is my world. But when I was at TCM, that was primarily what I did. I was the editorial manager, and I also was the YouTube channel manager. So my job, of course, is looking at the back end of everything, trying to figure out what videos, you know, are people responding to, what videos do we need to be creating. So I'm really proud of the work that I put into YouTube. But I saw there's a good amount of younger people. I wouldn't say we don't have Gen Zers to my knowledge. I'm sure we probably do, but who knows if they comment or not. Maybe that's not a Gen Z thing. I don't know. But surprisingly more older people, older than the Gen X generation, because so many of these people are TCM fans that they come to the YouTube channel and maybe they'll start with an archival interview from, you know, Farley Granger or something like that. And they somehow find their way watching a video about Black Christmas. And they're just like, I never knew TCM showed these movies. This is incredible. So it's been really cool seeing how much we've introduced people in different age ranges to it. And currently right now, when I came to Paris, I went to graduate school. I just got done. So I have a lot of younger people in my classes. I am the older of the cool kids that hangs out. I just drink a lot. That's the only thing. But of those younger kids, I'm introducing them to a lot of movies that they've never heard of. Cult is different for at least the people that I know who call themselves movie fans who are Gen Zers. Cult is it means different things for them. So I'm introducing them to this kind of 80s, 90s, 70s world that, we're used to.
And that's something that Zach and I have never actually had a discussion on air. And I think this would be a great time.
Yeah.
What do you consider a cult movie? And Toya, you just said it's different for different people, but like, how do you kind of figure what falls into the cult movie status as far as TCM goes and the world, the waters that we're swimming in here? Millie, like what is your definition? What are you looking for? Or at least like, is it like, what is it? The court's version of porn? Like I know it when I see it type of thing?
Well, I mean, I think that kind of at the core of it, it's cult movies are movies that people feel like an extreme amount of passion for. And, for various reasons, either they think it's funny or, I mean, I really do think that it is passion because, fandom is such a huge part of this world. And I feel like, there's this difference between somebody who just liked a movie or whatever, and then somebody who just really liked a movie and whatever that movie is. I feel like that's a huge part of the cult experience. But I don't know. I mean, I think it's interesting though to think about it in terms of the generations, because so much of what I grew up on as a cult, like when I was a kid and I was being presented like cult movies, it was this canon of films, right? That was sort of like, all right, you start with your Herschel Gordon Lewis and your John Waters, and then you move into maybe Italian giallo movies and cannibal movies, and then you get into just sort of the weird American stuff, Something Weird Video, and and so I kind of went through that whole indoctrination process of primarily sort of almost like independent films from the 50s, 60s, and 70s. And I think that that's because, I'm a child of the 80s and 90s. And so, the people that I was looking towards for that cultural information, all of the people that worked at record stores and video stores and wrote books and were presenting weird movies on TV, they were all 20 years older than me or something, you know what I mean? So it was of their generation. So, I think that to Toya's point, I think that the idea of cult movies is changing a lot. I don't think it's strictly now a sort of horror movie thing, or what people would think a cult movie is just some extremely violent or extremely sexual thing. Sometimes cult movies are weird melodramas, or something a little less in the exploitation realm, and maybe something else, which I feel like is something that is a more recent phenomenon and not as much as something that I was presented with when I was 17. If you know what I mean.
And they can change over time too, because, we find now, especially on Instagrams when we do most of our promotion and we kind of talk to people, and, as well as I do, 25 years ago, maybe John Carpenter's The Thing or The Fog or Assault on Precinct 13, those were all cult movies because a lot of people had never seen them. But over time, John Carpenter's become so mainstream, so many people have discovering him, which is awesome. But does that shift him and his movies? The Thing was the ultimate cult classic film in the 90s. If you knew The Thing, you were cool. Now pretty much everyone has seen The Thing. So the question is that still a cult movie now?
Yeah, I think about that with Night of the Living Dead, because at the very beginning of Underground, we I mean, we were trying, I think at the very beginning, we were just trying to establish the tone of what the franchise was. And so we were going through all of those like classic midnight movies, like Eraserhead, and especially like Night of the Living Dead, which at the time was a cult film and was stuff that you could see at midnight in movie theaters. And I feel like now, Night of the Living Dead is a classic film. I feel like it plays now in the regular schedule on TCM. I mean, it's got so many like historical moments, and it's been kind of recontextualized to, so it's not just some kind of like depraved zombie movie that weirdos are watching. It's like on the Criterion Channel, and it's in museums, and it's being presented by like, kind of like hoity-toity folks. And so I feel like, to your point, I think that's kind of what's happened with a lot of, old cult movies. You know what I mean?
Yeah, like, Criterion to put out Repo Man on Blu-ray. So it's like, is Repo Man a cult movie now? So yeah, it's interesting. I'm sorry I cut you off, Toya.
No, you're fine. You're fine. I think that the word cult, I just love it to describe a film anyway. I just think it's just such a cool word. And, us having grown up with it as a term to usually kind of mean these like off the beaten path types of movies. I think though that is just a very amorphous term, and I'd be interested to see how the conversation changes over the next decade, because I think the medium has a lot to do with it. I think that from our generations and before, it was how can these kind of hard to find films it's like a rite of passage. You got to hunt down this VHS tape because this movie did so poorly or did not get, the justice it was supposed to get during its time, that maybe the distribution is off. So, you can't really find it anywhere. So it's one of those, or you find a bootleg copy that someone else has, or you go on eBay, which I've done, scoured eBay for, different region movies and try to figure out how can I play this. And I just think now, in a world where everything is so easily accessible in some way or another, even though they definitely aren't, it's very hard to find, but if you're a person of the internet, you know how to find movies if you want to find movies. So I think that now, as that changes, there's more and more films that are considered cult, because when I was first an undergrad, everybody loved Fight Club. That's definitely a cult movie that in itself created one of the most passionate fan groups at the time, and people creating their own fight clubs to imitate the movie. And now you have something as big budget as James Cameron's Avatar, the passion that fan base has of repeatedly seeing these movies. They have the same way of watching these movies that a cult fan of the 80s who's trading videotapes would. So I just think it'll be a very interesting conversation over the next decade or so to see how that word changes and what it means for different things.
And availability plays into that as well, because growing up in the 80s, I would have assumed that Cocoon would have been available for the rest of my life on every platform and every format. But now you're like, you can't find like Cocoon like anywhere streaming, and I don't even know if there's a Blu-ray out there. And it's like, but that's Cocoon. That was such a huge movie. So are we going to see a flip side to that coin and see movies that may have been mainstream at one point become cult later on due to availability? And to your point, Toya, I think it'll be interesting to sort of watch that evolve over time, because I think the word cult is an evolutionary thing. Like, calling something cult, I think it's going to be an evolutionary thing over time.
I always have to find a plug for my love for James Spader, but this is another reason of how cult changes over time and what becomes available, because for some reason during the pandemic, I got very obsessed with James Spader, and I am currently still on track to watch every single movie he's ever done. So, but that has been way harder than I thought, because so many of his movies are hard to find. He did a lot of these just kind of offbeat 80s, 90s movies. And so I've through that found people who, we're trading servers even of just like, hey, I have this movie on my server. Here's my login, do this. So, I mean, even just something like, he did this movie called White Palace with Susan Sarandon. Yep. It's, not a lot of people know or care about that movie, but it has a cult fan base because there is a group of, young women who can't really find this physically, or one person had a physical copy and they ripped it. So it's just this like passionate fan base who love loves, Spader and is all trying to, oh, this is how you can watch, Star-Crossed, or this is how you can watch all these, random movies that he did. And I love that. I think that that's a cool way of recontextualizing what cult is, just because that's where the passion comes in. If you love these movies so much, you're going to dig for them. You're going to find out where they are. You're going to talk to people about it. You're going to ask everybody that you know. You're going to go down these rabbit holes. And I think that that's the fun and the beauty of what cult movies are.
Well, you brought up bringing up James Spader on our show is huge, because we've covered New Kids and we've covered Tough Turf. So, and Jack's Back will probably come down the pipe.
Jack's Back.
So do we, right? And Cynthia Gibbs, I think, in that as well. And when Millie, you brought up Something Weird Video, and I remember seeing those in the back catalog, like Critics' Choice video catalogs, right? In the back, they'd have a Something Weird section. But now we have these boutique Blu-ray companies like Vinegar Syndrome and Severin and
Code Red and stuff.
Code
like
Red
City editions, yeah.
And then even Kino Lorber, really gets. Fortunately for Kino Lorber, we have Tough Turf in a pristine edition of Tough Turf.
I think Mill Creek gave us the New Kids, which is, and I love those Mill Creek VHS slipcovers. I just got my Replacement Killers just for that VHS style slipcover.
Yeah, and you guys all bring up really good points of like what makes the cult movie, or sometimes if something's so bad it becomes considered a cult movie. I like to call it a subcategory, like a masterpiece. It's so bad, it's right instead of a cult movie, because I associate cult movies with like I remember The Warriors. No one knew about 20 years ago, but now everybody knows about The Warriors.
Hell, there's a video game made of The Warriors,
right?
Yeah.
And it's become, especially in like the hip hop community and in the graffiti art community, it's really become like one of their holy grail films, right? But your book specifically, the 50 must-see films, you chose 50 movies for this book, which must have been really, really freaking hard to figure out what movies go in this not top 50, but 50 must-sees, right?
Right.
Can you talk a little bit about the process of how you selected these 50 films? Millie, do you want to go into that?
Sure. So, I think to be honest with you, I don't know, I won't speak for Toya entirely, but I think that we had a pretty easy time with picking the ones we wrote about, but it was really mostly about like, how do you, like, what are the boundaries of what you can pick, right? And so part of it was that we wanted to put together an entire list of all of the movies that had aired on the franchise, which I've actually been keeping a record of on Letterboxd for several years. And it was just sort of like, here's everything that's ever played. So we put it in a document. And we're like, oh my God, there's like over 400 movies here. That's crazy to think about. But then going through it and just kind of seeing like what stood out to us. I mean, for me personally, I think part of like what I gravitated towards were movies that, obviously were things that I just wanted to think about and write about, right? But also that they were primarily movies that I thought had not been kind of part of this like canon conversation, that we're just sort of like, okay, like we could like write about Eraserhead and Pink Flamingos, like all of these things that have been sort of like out there in the world, or maybe it's an opportunity for me to go really hard on a movie like Remember My Name, which is a movie that it's not a horror film, it's not an action film, but it is like this kind of quirky, relationship drama, but also has, a distribution problem. Like people haven't seen it very much because it's not been out there in the home video worlds and stuff. And maybe that changes, but it felt like an underground type of film because it just hadn't been seen very much, which goes back to the accessibility issue, which I think is very fascinating. I think that is a fascinating component to what makes a movie a cult movie. But yeah, so for me, it was just sort of like, well, what would I like to write about? What do I think needs like a spotlight? And then also just seeing the movies like in a list and going, oh, well, here are movies that a lot of these movies are made by like women and people of color and LGBTQ directors and feature like those types of stories, which I think is probably related to who Toy and I are as people.
Mhm.
And so there was just that whole notion of it. It was just sort of like, what do I think is important and should be called a cult film and is something that I want to focus on, you know?
Yeah, and I think we got a very interesting like kind of way of being able to do it, because we kind of got the green light to write this book, and it was a little too much freedom at the beginning of just, you guys know cult movies, write about, whatever top 50. So that was a conversation of just like, oh my God, like that, what is cult? What is the, so how can we calm down and say what is the 50 greatest? We knew we didn't want to do that. We didn't want to quantify it by saying what's great and what's not. We didn't want to be redundant, because that's been done before. That is a constant, we both grew up, all of us, I'm sure, have grown up reading books about it, seeing lists that, every year that come online of the greatest, you should, whatever, all of that. And I think for us, it made more sense to just look at TCM Underground as a franchise, since that has been doing the heavy lifting for the past, 15 years, of just being the place for cult movies. And so, yeah, we just decided to look at TCM Underground. And yeah, I mean, as Millie mentioned, it was, over 400 films, but it was kind of easy for us to just separately, because we decided to split it 25-25. And it was easy for us to just look at it and go, these are the movies that I know I'm passionate about. I'd love to spend the next, month, 2 months, however long we, were writing this book, researching, doing, rewatching these movies, breaking them down. And so that was the fun part. The fun part was getting to just talk about these movies that we were already, separately and commonly passionate about, and then getting to just gush over them. And then when we kind of came together with our initial list, it was so diverse and random of just like, oh, but this fits because, we're completely different people with our own different backgrounds and way of approaching movies. But, I've been saying to Millie, it's like, it felt like a left brain, right brain situation where like she picked the things that I was like, oh my God, those are fantastic. Some I haven't even seen before. And I picked things that, that were completely very, general to my nature. And then there was a few, like we only had a few that we overlapped on. And so, we just compromised of, okay, who's going to talk about that one? And then we wrote it. And it was great to read each other's for the first time when we sent each other our first draft of what our first movie was. And it was like, oh yeah, that's exactly how I kind of wrote mine. Cool. So it flowed very, very perfectly.
That's so cool. You have moments in this book that, like you said, Millie, there are some like mainstream kind of dramas that definitely deserve to be spotlighted or spotlit, I guess I should say. But then there's ones, of course, like genre cult movies like The Brood, right? Or Butcher, Baker, Nightmare Maker, which is a personal favorite of mine, and one that will pop up on Pad, by the way, down the road. We'll break down that movie scene by scene. But then, of course, Xanadu, and like you cover every gamut, which is so brilliant. It's so accessible, I think, to a wide audience. You have
it's
some
not
of the
dry. It's full of life. The text is full of life.
Totally, like your WTF moments or your OMG moments, and sprinkled throughout. It's really a great, and I love that it's must see versus greatest. Yeah, because that's the thing. I have a stack of like 50 greatest books or 50 greatest movies by Entertainment Weekly, or Premiere Magazine put out their 100 lists way back when. But then it changes over time, because what is great to you versus someone else is so relative, right? And so but must see is like, no, if you've seen it, but here's something, if you haven't seen it, you got to check this out. And that's what I love about your book.
And you don't put them in like order, like alphabetical order. You actually break them into categories. And I'll just read off what the categories are for everybody out there, which is great because we find this a lot with Podcasts After Dark, that people are, oh, you're a horror podcast. Right? No, we're a cult movie podcast. We do comedies, we do drama, we do action, but we do horror, usually what gets us the most attention. But I loved seeing this because I was like, yes, you all get it. It's not just horror films, as both of you have said multiple times. It's not just horror films. But first one is it's crime time. Then we have domestic disturbances. Each one has a handful, about 8 movies under each one. Then we have Fright Club, rebellion and youth movements, and visual delights and other strange mind melters. In there, you have stuff like Mac and Me and the Garbage Pail Kids. Fantastic. But how did you guys come up with just the categories? You know what I mean? The category names and everything.
Actually, I think it was probably a collabo between Toy and I to come up with the names. But I think when we looked at our lists, we were like, let's try to put some of these movies have like themes, and we kind of went from there. I mean, I think that we were just sort of thinking like, what's a good way to organize the book? I think I actually, to be completely honest with you, I was like, why don't we just do it alphabetically? And everyone's like, no, that's not a good way to do it. And I'm so glad they said,
this is so much more fun. This is such a more fun way to sort of engage with the content.
That's what an index is for, by the way.
Yeah. And it allows you to just kind of pop around. It's really like, I mean, this term is used a lot, but it's a vibe. Like, it's like, I feel like there are vibes to these movies, and maybe that's the way people want to experience going through a book like this now, which is like, cool, we did it. But yeah, I mean, I feel like there are certain ones, like I feel like Fright Club, I feel like that is primarily Toya. I feel like those are a lot of her entries because she's a big horror fan. And I will say that I feel like the Domestic Disturbances one is a lot of me, because I gravitate towards those types of films, like the weird melodramas and stuff like that. So yeah, I mean, I think it's really fun. It was really fun to categorize them because it allowed us to sort of like, put like films together. It was fun to do.
Yeah, and we're both very thematic people. Like, we Millie's the programmer for TCM Underground. Not even TCM Underground, a good chunk of TCM, like a good chunk of what you see on TCM is Millie. And of course our amazing, programming team, like great people, but everybody there works thematically. Like, they're fun. They have fun creating themes. When I was there, there'd be emails sometime going around, or just side chats in the hallway of like, hey, I'm thinking about, making a 311 day just as a joke, because it's, what movies can fit this theme. And so they would just, people just have their creative ways of doing that. And I love to make lists. And when I was at TCM, I was very heavy into the marketing copy. That was my job, to write marketing copy. So I love a kitschy, punny situation. So that was just like, that was kind of one of the more fun parts that I didn't expect to like, was naming them, putting them in little buckets, and figuring out, the Crime Time, that still cracks me up. It's Crime Time, Fright Club. Like, I just still love that. I still love that we got to do that. And then, Domestic Disturbances, just these great ways of kind of putting these things together. And yeah, to Millie's point, our personality definitely shows in the movies that we picked, and kind of the bucket of movies that we did. But we were also very cognizant not to, belabor it of, Millie loves, the domestic melodramas of the past, but, that's not all of her entries. There's a few that I took, and vice versa. So we did I think that we were very just cognizant of making sure that just because we love all of these doesn't mean that everything should be in this section or in this book, because we wanted to make sure that we were talking about movies that a lot of people have truly have overlooked over the years. For instance, a movie that I picked is this movie called MMA, which for the longest had been classified as blaxploitation. And I constantly tell people that it's a huge disservice to the movie, because I view it as a coming of age movie. So if you go into these movies expecting this because of what some list said once upon a time of somebody who may not have really even watched it or got it, then you're kind of missing the point of what makes these movies great. And I think that that's the beauty of what we got to do with writing this, was to show people from our perspectives why we love these movies so much and why they have been overlooked. Or how.
And as somebody who spent a lot of time at horror conventions and whatnot, just going through the bootleg, VHSs and stuff, they're never in any kind of order. This felt like perfect. Like, I feel like as I'm going through this book, it feels the same as me sort of just looking through all those old VHS tapes back in the day. And it's such a collection. It gets my imagination going. It raises my interests for a lot of these films. A lot of them I have not seen, as listeners of the show know, Zach is the knowledge bank of our show. I'm more of the mainstream cult guy, but it's it's all about everyone's personal preferences and everything like that. But yeah, this book gives me that vibe, that smell of being in the dealer's room. I'm like, oh yeah. And it's also the perfect size book where I can also hand it to somebody and be like, hey, borrow this, go look through it, read what you want to read. You don't have to read every entry, just pick the ones that seem interesting to you. And I like that as well, is that it's not numbered. You can jump to the horror section you want. You can jump to the domestic disturbances, if you want, and stuff like that. Whatever sort of gravitates, towards you and everything. I like how it's all set up.
Well, and I think, like you brought up MMA, I would say the same with Butcher Baker Nightmare Maker, where that box art labeled it a certain way for decades. And I would say, Millie, maybe even up till today, people see that art and they think, oh, it's a slasher movie.
Right.
But there's so much more depth to these movies. I think about, I brought up Tough Turf earlier. Tough Turf, people would say, well, how do you label that movie? Oh, it's an action movie. Well, not really. Oh, it's a thriller. Well, not really. Oh, it's a comedy. Oh, not really. It's a musical. Like, there's all these subcategories, right?
Yeah.
So Butcher Baker, you take that movie and you go, well, this has so much more layers to it. I jumped immediately to that movie when I opened up your book, by the way, because it's a movie that I feel oftentimes does get overlooked for the same reason MMA may get, put in another category. Then that's the whole beauty of cult. It's so much more than just that one label. And I think that's very relevant to today, more so today maybe than any other time, of putting a label on something can really alienate, right? And then this is doing the complete opposite. It's opening up a world to people who might go, oh, okay, well, I'll check it out now.
Oh, that's awesome to hear. Yeah, that's what we wanted.
Right on.
Yeah, no, and to your point about Butcher Baker Nightmare Maker, I mean, I just talked about this a couple days ago. In fact, I think we're in this era right now where people are kind of like re-examining films and pretty much everything. And like you, I was presented that film as a slasher, as like a violent, horrible slasher film. But when you like really distill it, you're like, oh, this is actually more about like, it's like a woman's story almost in a weird way. You know what I mean? And, I got to be honest, I feel like part of that is just sort of like people maybe being smarter about films now. I mean, I think when I was in high school, I just wanted to see anything that was weird and transgressive and crazy. And I was like, just put me in front of Cannibal Holocaust, man. I just want to be weird. And like, and I was young and I just didn't have the like prefrontal cortex to really process things. And so it was that thing where I was like, now that I'm an older person, it is interesting to go back and see some of these movies that were just presented as like these crazy things, and then now being able to like, I don't know, think about them in a different way. I mean, granted, when I rewatch the Garbage Pail Kids movie, I was like, it's still the garbage. I mean, and maybe there is something else there. And I did watch it again and go, okay, there's some interesting things being presented in this movie, but it is also still like a garbage pail kid farting off somebody's mustache at the end of it, right?
Yeah.
It's still dumb and funny, right?
And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that.
Exactly. There's nothing wrong with that. Yeah.
Well, you brought up Mac and Me, Corey, when you were listing off some of the movies in the book. Mac and Me, for better or worse, gets in this category of like, Paul Rudd uses it as a bit now on Conan O'Brien or whatever talk show he's on, and which is hilarious. So people automatically associate it with that. I remember seeing it as a kid when it first came out in the theater, and it being a marketing tool for McDonald's at the time. But there's a heart to it as well. And I mean, I've watched it again recently, and I think that's the beautiful thing about what Corey and I do on our show is when we revisit these movies from our childhood, that we weren't supposed to see as kids, but now watching it under a different lens, a more aware lens, a more refined lens, where we've done a little bit of research. We're a little bit, your prefrontal cortex is, everything is changing and you're in a different place in your life. Look, I saw Street Trash when I was a kid and I was like, oh yeah, show me that scene where they do Keep Away. And then now I watch it again recently. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm totally watching this from a different perspective now because you've grown up, right? But your book does such a great job of writing that fine line of kind of covering all those bases. I can't say it enough. You guys did a great job with the book.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, that was definitely going into it. We definitely wanted to give these movies a different type of attention. Now, again, there is not to say that Mac and Me is an underrated, brilliant film. Some people might think that, and that's totally fine. I personally chose that movie because I think it's one of the greatest films of all time. Of how did this get made? Yeah. And like, why? Right? Did we need it? But just the fact that an entire generation of kids grew up watching this movie, and like, even if it just haunted your dreams, which for me it did. It was a movie that I saw at a sleepover that I did not forget about for the rest of my life. And it was the first opportunity I got to talk about it, which was with this book.
And now you're making money.
Of course I'm talking about Mac and Me. Yeah. Exactly. So it's been really fun getting to recontextualize stuff, but I also think that that's the beauty of being passionate about film, being critics, being, having a critical analysis of just approaching art. It's always wanting to revisit something, look at it from a different lens. Well, maybe I didn't like that when I was a kid, and now I watched it and it takes on a different meaning. Or maybe I did watch it as a kid and I, loved it, and watch it now and it's kind of terrible, but I'm still kind of fascinated with what it's doing. I think that those are the things that we wanted to pick apart and kind of bring to the book and to the movies, because there's a lot of truly underrated gems in this book that are just movies that I am constantly like, someone should be sued because no one knows that this movie exists. Like, someone should literally be sued for it. And then there's other movies that we talk about that I'm like, I am shocked if anybody appreciates me putting Xanadu or Mac and Me in it, but I stand by both of those films because they did something for me that a lot of other movies have not.
And, like you discover, quote unquote, discover a movie, discover it for yourself. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
And there's no greater joy sometimes than finding like a new favorite movie. We'll watch a lot of stuff, or I'll watch a lot of stuff in between recordings and everything to try to become a better, critic of cult films and everything. But sometimes you'll discover stuff that it's like your new favorite movie. Like I was watching 1979 Prophecy, and I was like, I love this movie. They bill it as an eco terror movie, but it's a freaking monster film hidden in there, and it's fantastic. And then I just watched Soul Survivor per Zach's recommendation the other night, and I was like, oh my God, it owes so much to this movie. And I'm like, and I want to just shout it from the rooftops now. So there's also, on the flip side of the coin of the discovery, it's also the flip side of being like, like if you give this to somebody and they find their new favorite, like at least one of their new favorite movies in this book, that has to be a great feeling that you kind of like, gave that to them, That's the goal, right?
That's the goal. That's ideally, if one person, finds a movie that they go, oh my God, I've never heard of this movie before, but now this is the best thing I've ever seen. Yeah, we've done our jobs.
Yeah. So much of that is such an honor for me to even have that idea floated in our direction, because I obviously grew up in that sort of pre-internet world of discovering cult movies, which required me to like go to Tower Records and buy copies of like, the Psychotronic Guide to Film or Danny Perry's cult books and Video Hound's Guide to Cult Movies. And it was just like me, like, putting post-it notes on pages and like marking things and things that I'd have to go rent at the video store. I mean, it was just like such a analog process back then, but it's that thing of like, if now we can do that for somebody else, like if now our book becomes the thing that you like dog ear and like underline, I can't imagine a better honor than that, to be honest. So
I just have to shout this out because I just saw it pop up on Twitter that Pam Grier is going to be on the TCM podcast, right? And getting spotlighted.
She's going to be on, I think it's this 4th season of The Plot Thickens, which is basically like TCM's podcast. And I am personally so excited to hear what she has to say, because basically she's going to just chronicle her life. And so much of her films were a part of TCM Underground. And obviously there's there's at least one of them in the book. I think she's
Yeah.
I think she's in Blackula too, technically. So
Yeah.
maybe there's two movies. Or actually, I don't even think I think she's in the second.
She's in the second Blackula. Yeah.
So she's only in one movie, I think, in the book. But
The
still,
Friday Foster.
I mean, yeah.
Yes, Friday Foster. Yeah.
She's a huge influence on the franchise. So
100%. And that was the hard part too, because you can't have a cult movie book without a Pam Grier film. So it was kind of going through, okay, well, what have we shown? What movie needs to get talked about? Like what, and I just think that with Friday Foster, that's such a different performance from her. And I just think she's able to be such a different character than what is constantly thought of with her. Yeah. So I'm really glad that, we got to put that in the book, but I'm even more just like completely astounded that she's going to be on the podcast. It's been rumors for a while, and I'm very upset that after I left TCM that it happened, but I'm glad that, better now than never. But yeah, she is just an idol. Like it's truly amazing.
Yeah, I will say there was something that happened a couple of years ago where someone reported that the actor Wings Hauser had died, and he was very much alive. And so Corey and I got on this kick of wanting to celebrate the movies that he's been in, because they're much more diverse than all horror, all action. It's a wide range. And we had the opportunity to interview him a couple months back, and just tremendous honor, because I think he's one of those guys that does not get appreciated for his overall body of work. But then you look at someone like Pam Grier, who I remember seeing her in Jackie Brown, and after not seeing her on screen for a while, and just that's my favorite Quentin Tarantino film, by the way. And it's just falling in love with the idea, like cherishing her, cherishing Robert Forster, by the way, too, and who's a legendary actor, rest in peace. And you get to see these icons. And I think, again, that's another thing that your book has done so well, because you're spotlighting, or you're making it known that there's some really A-list actors, quote unquote. When I say A-list, I just mean a very talented actor, and people that you wouldn't expect in some of these movies. And it's so great that you're able to pull that out. I think, again, like you brought up earlier, this is going to be a book that people buy and discover at least one movie that they've never seen before. They're going to watch it and go, wow, I can see why that is a must-see movie, and I'm going to watch it again and again. I think you're definitely hitting the mark, and bravo.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks.
That's truly an honor to hear. Thank you so much.
And now, so the book is a TCM Underground, 50 must-see films from the world of classic, cult, and late night cinema. This episode is airing on Halloween. Happy Halloween, everybody. Hope y'all are having fun. Hey! But we got an early copy of this. Is the book available as of now? Is it out there for purchase?
As of now, it is available for pre-order on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, wherever books are sold, but it officially releases October 25th.
Okay, great. So by the time this airs, everyone can go out there and grab it. There will be a link to probably, I'll figure it out where, but either Amazon or whatever, but there will be a link in the show notes. And then we'll put in links to any other projects that you all are both working on. Millie, do you have anything you would like to plug?
Well, besides Underground, which is still chugging along every Friday night at 2 a.m., technically Saturday morning on Turner Classic Movies. But also I do a podcast myself called I Saw What You Did. And it's on the Exactly Right Network. Comes out every Tuesday. So check it out if you can.
And nice. What do you discuss on the podcast?
Oh, we're a movie podcast. You know how that goes.
Yes, we do.
It's myself and my friend Daniel Henderson, who is a TV writer, and it's a double features podcast. So we do every week we do a double feature based on a theme, because I'm obsessed with themes. But and the themes are always like totally out there. I mean, sometimes it's like, very standard, like here's an actor that we like or something, but sometimes it's truly like very specific to who Danielle and I are as people. So yeah, check it out.
We like our themes here. By the time you all are listening to this, our Halloween theme was sort of loosely created because we reviewed The Guest and then we reviewed Halloween 3 Season of the Witch. The connection being The Guest, they're both at Halloween, but The Guest had a lot of Season of the Witch references in it and everything. And boy, oh boy, I love that movie. The Guest is so freaking good. Zach and I both consider that a quintessential modern cult film.
Yeah, it's a modern cult classic.
I still haven't seen that. I got to add it to the list.
Oh, it's so good.
That's a Dan Stevens movie? Is that? Yeah. Oh,
it's
I remember
a Dan
when
Stevens
that came
joint.
out. I was like, ooh, he went from Downton Abbey to The Guest.
And
wow.
he's so good in it. And it's amazing. We both highly recommend it. Toya, do you have anything you'd like to plug and what you have going on out there?
Yeah, I will just plug TCM Slumberground. Go down YouTube, type it in, go watch all the episodes. That was just a labor of love to create, and I'm very happy that it is continuing to do wonders and just have amazing guests and talk about great films that are coming on TCM Underground. Also, if you're interested in what I write, check out my blog, thecinephiliac.com. I just muse a lot, I ramble a lot, I just talk about the things that I want to talk about, which is awesome. And then I'm always telling people, follow me on Letterboxd. I absolutely love Letterboxd. It's my favorite social media platform. So come talk about movies with me there. Listen to my read my rants, and then comment. Come hang out.
I've been finding myself spending more time on Letterboxd lately than any other social media app. Been very much enjoying the growing community there. We use it for Podcasting After Dark to create a list of every single movie that we've reviewed, like in order, and then I'll put the links into there. But then I have a personal one where I kind of keep a log and everything about what movies, and it's fun kind of actually seeing what movies you've been watching and stuff like that. So yeah, Letterboxd, I always champion that social media platform. I think it's fantastic. And like I said, I'll have all the links in the show notes, but please, everybody go out there, pick up a copy of TCM Underground, 50 must-see films from the world of classic cult and late-night cinema by Millie De Chirico and Quatoyiah Murry. Thank you both so much for coming on the show. Thank you both so much for rescheduling. We had a little bit of a hiccup last week. This was perfect. This turned out fantastic, and this was great. And it's a great book. It really is. Seriously, like, I'm not just blowing smoke or anything like that. This is a fantastic book. I personally recommend it, and I've read a lot of it already. And when I'm done with it, I think the highest compliment I can give is I'm going to start giving it to people to read, hand out and borrow, and be like, look, books should be, given outwards and everything like that. But of course, go pick up a copy, go support these ladies and everything. Go support TCM. Of course. Disregard everything I just said.
No. Do everything you said. Definitely buy the book, but then just give a copy to a friend and have them buy it. Treat it as a pyramid scheme. Just hand
it out on Halloween. You know what?
Yeah,
kids don't eat candy. Just start giving them these books.
Come on, read something, kids. And it's an early Christmas present. How about an early Christmas present for sure?
Exactly.
One of my favorite things to do on Christmas was open up and get a movie book. So there's some great pictures in there too. And yeah, you guys were fantastic. Thank you so much for coming on the show. And this has been a real honor to have you on. And really our not our first author per se, but definitely our first co-authors. And this book needs to be on everybody's bookshelf, everybody's coffee table, everybody's whatever you want to, wherever you put your books. Get this book and put it there.
That's right.
Put it in the toilet with you. Do what you got to do. It's a great read. It was super fun to write, and I'm just completely honored to even be here. Thank you guys for having us. This is wonderful. I'm very excited about this book coming out.
Yeah, we really appreciate the support. I mean, it means a lot to us that other movie people like the book. So we're just so honored to be on here talking with you guys about it, because I'm a big fan of your podcast. So I'm glad that you guys have read the book and enjoy it. So
thank you all so much. And so definitely go check out TCM Underground, 50 must-see films from the world of classic cult and late night cinema. So thank you both so much. And as always,
We'll catch you on the dark side. Yes, from 2 different countries, baby.
Right? Exactly.
Thank you for listening to Podcasting After Dark's exclusive interview series with Millie De Chirico and Quatoyiah Murry. And, as always, thank you for your support.